18 years ago, Miriam Lancewood and her husband Peter decided to live in the wilderness of New Zealand for 1 year. 1 year turned into 7 years. In this new episode, Miriam and I have an open and honest conversation about their lives in the wilderness, their struggles, their successes, and of course, everything they've learned from living in and with nature. Please join me in this remarkable and inspiring conversation. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.
Today, in this new episode of the Women's Table, I have a very special guest with an incredibly inspiring story, Miriam Lancewood. Miriam, along with her husband Peter, lived in the wilderness of New Zealand for 7 years. She's written a book about this experience, Women in the Wilderness. Welcome, Miriam. Thank you for being here today and for having this conversation with me.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Very nice. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a conversation actually more about the content of your book, Women in the Wilderness. I didn't read the book. I listened to the audiobook. You start the book, Women in the Wilderness, by describing how you resigned from your job at school. Mm-hmm. You go to your supervisor, who's also a friend of yours, feeling a bit nervous, and you inform her that you're quitting your job. When she realizes that you're serious, she asks you, but where are you going to work? Where? And your response, quite casually, and I quote, oh, nowhere really. Peter and I want to live in the wilderness. In the wilderness, in nature, high up in the mountains. Her mouth dropped open. Really? But why? She asked. And to be honest, I was wondering the same thing. Why?
Why? So the question is why we went to live in the wild in 2010, right? Yeah. It was in New Zealand, indeed, that I was working for a year to get residency. And after 1 year, we decided we want to do something different, totally different. We wanted to have a remarkable experience. Okay. And what happened is that every weekend we used to go hiking up in the mountains. But I never wanted to come back on Sunday night.
Okay.
And we said to each other, why can't we stay? Why can't we find a way to stay here? But then, of course, there's a food problem. And how do you organize yourself? So in that year that I was working and being mostly inside a building, we were thinking, how can we organize ourselves to just do 4 seasons? That was our intention, 4 seasons. And little did we know that it would turn out to be 7 years. But the question, why did we want to do that, is firstly to do something different. So when I met Peter, a New Zealander, 18 years ago, his motto always seemed to be, try to do something different. Because everyone is doing the same thing. So do something different. So that always resonated with me. But of course, we wanted to be part of nature rather than just being an observer. That was our intention, to discover what would happen to body and mind when living far away from civilization. And so we would be ourselves. We would be like a guinea pig. We do an experiment on ourselves and see what indeed would happen. Because if you don't do that, then every bit of suffering is just terrible. Right? But if you go through a storm or go through hunger or through cold or everything that is not so pleasant, and you wonder what will happen to body and mind in this situation, then it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened? What happened to body and mind?
There was a question, what we call a meta question, which means you cannot answer it straight away. You sort of have to live the answer. But what happened is that we felt very small in such a huge environment. You know, the Southern Alps of New Zealand are huge. Huge river, roaring river. You know, you can't even talk to each other standing next to the river. And then those mountains, and then the storms that come by, and the difficulty we had with surviving. We looked around, and all those animals are really capable of surviving. And us humans, we had the biggest trouble. So we felt very, very small. And we felt like we are subject to the wilderness. We are subject to nature. We cannot control anything. So we felt very, very small. And our problems, what happened in the past, what I said to such and such 15 years ago, is even more irrelevant. And so all those problems seemed to dissolve rather than being solved by thinking about it. So our mind seemed to go more and more like empty. There's more space because we had less and less trouble because all those problems dissolved. And I think the major aspect of that is not having technology. No Facebook, Instagram, no social media, nothing that added to comparison or added to, psychological issues. And so our mind became more and more clear, empty. And with that came more clarity. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest effect. There's more clarity. So we can see trouble coming because we can look clearly. So there is less conflicts because we make the right choices because the choices are made on clarity and not on confusion or just reaction.
Yeah. What also struck me was how you mentioned that your senses improved. You said you could see better, hear and smell better.
Yeah, that's right. Also, it took me by surprise. All of these things were a surprise to me, which is, I think, an important detail because it's not intended, All those senses improved by hunting. So I grew up as a vegetarian and I had no experience with touching meat, let alone hunting, right? And so I started hunting in the wilderness for our, because we wanted to do this, surviving out there in the bush, right? And I think hunting is in our blood, that everyone, literally everyone, can learn it because our ancestors lived that way.
Yeah.
And so do it long enough and you become intuitively good at hunting, even though you can't learn it from a book or anything.
No.
Yeah, so my eyesight became better because I had to look. My hunting was depending on my eyes. So my eyes automatically improved. And hearing and sense of smell.
Yeah.
And that in combination with memory, something humans are very good at. So I remember where I last saw that hare or that goat. And so I put all of these senses together and that's how I became good at hunting. But it took a long time to become good at hunting.
Yeah. And you were quite upset, right? After killing your first goat.
Yes, indeed. It was very tragic, very dramatic. Yeah. It was a small goat and the parents were right there and I shot that little goat. And then somehow the mother and the father understood that was it. They didn't run away. They understood that I was not going to kill them, which I thought was interesting. And they sort of just stood around and then the father said, okay, let's go. I think our son is dead.
Okay.
I make it very human-like, but that's what it felt like. And I felt so sad. I cried. And I thought, what am I doing here? Killing this innocent animal, murdering an innocent animal that has done absolutely nothing wrong for our, game of living in the wilderness. It felt terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But after some time, when I carried it back on my shoulders and I brought it back to camp and Peter was just so happy with our first little bit of meat. And then we ate it and we got so much strength from it. Yeah. And so much energy. And then I thought, okay, this is what we set out to do. So this is what we're going to try.
Yeah. And you also shared that at the beginning of your new life, you were overwhelmed by boredom. You were bored.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And that was the most difficult thing. So, of course, I had a sort of a busy life working in a school and a lot of visitors and a lot of social meetings and email, all that. I didn't have a phone at the time, but I was always busy on the computer with emails. And then give all that up and then go and live in the wilderness, right? At first, there was absolutely nothing to do.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, what are we going to do? And suddenly it felt like our future was one big white sheet. And it was like nothing. There is no future. And there was a very peculiar feeling. And then almost a little bit unsettling. And I felt discombobulated and insecure even. So I realized, hey, we make the future. We create a vision of the future. And that's what we call security. How weird. Because that's not real.
No,
right? There's nothing real about that.
The future doesn't exist.
No, not in, it exists when it happens, but actually, the illusion of it, the making of it is an illusion. But anyway, it took about 2 to 3 weeks for the mind to slow down in order to meet the rhythm of nature.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? So that was another discovery. Yeah. And those were not easy weeks. We were bored to death. And Peter said, you have to learn the art of doing nothing. Yeah. And do you think, well, that's easy. That's like meditation. No. Meditation is doing something. You meditate in order to become enlightened, right? You still progressing towards enlightenment, and you sit down and meditate for 1 hour and you feel calmed down. So there is something. You try doing absolutely nothing. Yeah. That's much, much harder. Yeah. And so, but that's absolutely needed in order to calm down. And only after those 3 weeks, which is longer than most people's holidays, you are in the rhythm of nature. And the rhythm of nature is so much slower than our sped up, hyperactive mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I listened to an interview with you that there are no clocks in the wild. So you go to bed when it's dark. You get up when it's early. You eat whenever you're hungry.
So we didn't take any machine, not even a clock. So no emergency beacon, no telephone, obviously. Nothing, not even a clock. So we didn't know the time. And in the beginning I was like, when should we be eating? That's of course ridiculous. You eat when you're hungry, and when you're not hungry, you're not eating. And all of eating is strange because when I catch, for instance, an animal like a pig or a goat, then there's a lot to eat. So we have to eat so much. Yeah. You're completely full, but you have to keep on eating because otherwise the meat will go off and then the animal died for nothing, which would be even more terrible. We tried smoking, but that's not easy in New Zealand where it's very, very humid. Yeah. And there's also nasty flies that lay eggs immediately and you get maggots straight away, and it's all dramatic. But the conclusion is you had to eat as much as possible. And so, when I catch something, you have to just keep on eating. So we also became very good at feast and famine. But and we didn't know what time it was, so we just went to bed when it was getting dark. So we do nothing after dark, which means in winter we slept for so many hours, maybe more than 12 hours. Yeah. 14 hours maybe. And in summer, way less, maybe only 7. But the strangest thing is that we didn't really notice that there was so much time difference. That is the interesting thing. We didn't really notice. Theoretically, we know that the days are much longer in summer, but we didn't really notice. Yeah. Because for our listeners, you're Dutch, right? Born and raised in the Netherlands? That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So your parents, do they still live in the Netherlands? No, they actually moved to France. Yeah, both of my sisters as well. One is in Sweden, the other one is also in France. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how did they respond to when you mentioned, I'm going to the wilderness and live there for a year? The biggest shock to my parents was that I was living with a man who's 30 years older. You know, he's about the age of my mum. So my father's a little older. But after that, once they had accepted that shock, all of the rest of my decisions seemed relatively minor. Yeah. But when I said I'm going to live in the wilderness, it started just with 4 seasons, so 1 year. Yeah. And I said, okay, I'll be gone for 3 months, and after that I'll send an email when we are, back for resupply. So I just give them, bite-size information. I didn't say, I'm going to live in the wilderness for 7 years and you will hardly ever see me or hear from me. It would be terrible news. Yeah, but that was, in hindsight. Yeah. What about the loneliness? Were there ever times, because you are so depending on each other, because there are the two of you, weren't there any moments that you thought, just the two of us, I need to see other people? Because I remember that, I recall that in your book, whenever there were other hunters, you were really happy and excited to see other people. Yeah. Yes, indeed. I always say the less I see people, the more I appreciate them. And that's certainly the case. When you have not seen anyone for so long, it's so enjoyable to see another human being who walks just like us and sits down and likes the same things. It's almost a miracle to see another human. And also those sort of people, when they come to our fire and we sit around, we talk, and they tell us stories, very personal stories, because they think we will not write them down. They think we are strangers that will never see each other again, It's always funny, isn't it? Why do people share such personal stories to strangers and not to their own wife or husband or parents?
Yeah.
Anyway. And those meetings were really very, very nice. Yeah, and I remember them well, and that's why I was able to write them down in detail. Yeah. Yeah. But never very lonely, because also I was always with Peter. So at the time, I go alone, I go hunting, of course. I never felt lonely. And also I never really missed anything. It was just so full, like 100%. Yeah. The life is 100% in the wilderness. Yeah. Never had any space to miss anything.
No. Because that's actually my next question. Was it hard to give up all your earthly possessions, the material stuff? Because speaking for myself, just for me, I mean, I like my luxury life, I don't even like camping. So was it hard for you? Was it hard for you to give up everything?
No, not so much. Peter and I, we met in India. And then we climbed the Himalayas for 2 months. Yeah. And there we saw the sadhus, which is like a spiritual person who has absolutely nothing. Okay. So he only owns one robe, And we both of us thought, wow, that would be the ultimate. So I guess if you grow up in sort of upper middle class Holland or New Zealand, or anywhere in Western cultures, being rich or having many possessions is not so exciting anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what I'm used to. My parents got everything. When I grew up, I had everything. I never experienced any shortcoming. Right? Yeah. So getting more wealth is boring. Yeah. Now, how about having absolutely nothing? There is a new challenge.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Both Peter and I had this sort of challenge, like imagine owning nothing. That would be so cool. Yeah, it's just as ridiculous as wanting to have everything. Yeah, it's just the opposite, right? Yeah. But anyway, at that time we thought that was our aim. So our hero, so to say, was that sadhu who had nothing and was completely free. Yeah. So the less you have, the more spiritual, sort of. That's what we believed at the time. And it's, in some sense, it's true, because what I realized is that for every possession, you're also, a little space is occupied in your brain, like you have a car. So you have to look after that car. Where is it? You know where the car is, right? You have to know where the keys are. You have to organize insurance and registration and warrant of fitness and all of these things.
Yeah.
So it takes up a lot of brain energy to look after that one possession. And you don't only have a car, but all the other things as well. So getting rid of all that, indeed, freed up the mind. Yeah, so I didn't mind. I find it hard to throw away shit, but I brought it away to second-hand shops, and then I feel more satisfied.
Yeah,
not wasted, you see. Yeah, I can recommend it.
Yeah, isn't it? I think it's remarkable that the two of you met. Two people meet while traveling, and then they have all the same visions, goals, something like that, about traveling and the way you want to live. Yeah, I think it's amazing that the two of you met, like soulmates, kindred spirits.
Yeah, indeed. He is, of course, much older, 30 years older, so he's a different generation. Yeah. But apart from that difference, we have a lot in common. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have the same intention in life, which is living close to nature, living with little possessions, experiencing loads, not spending much time working and getting more money or more prestige or, all of these things, no career, any of those things, and discover what the mind is capable of. Yeah, so definitely.
Yeah. You return to civilization sometimes to do some shopping, right? Some grocery shopping.
Mm.
Yeah. So you could not live from everything in nature, like fruits or the animals you hunted?
If we were able to live on a seaside, like the indigenous people, like the Maoris did 200 years ago, Maybe, yeah, because there's a lot more to eat and you've got seafood and seals and all of those things. But high up in the mountains, that's where the Maoris never try to live. Yeah. But that's the only place we could live because all the rest is just, roads and cities. Okay. So the only place you can get away from everything is high up in the mountains. And there is not much to eat. No, you have berries, totara berries and snowberries in March and February. But apart from that, you have to live off meat and just a few herbs. So no, there's very little to eat. At the moment, we are in Europe and we see there's so much more to eat. Yeah. You could almost live off just gathering fruit and nuts and, especially if you can preserve a little bit for the winter, of course. But otherwise, no, we always had to have some supplies. So in New Zealand, we always had rice and lentils and just a few basics like flour and yeast to make bread. Yeah. And then I went hunting and we gathered plants for vegetables. Yeah. Yeah, we had to do that way.
Yeah. So after you returned from civilization back to nature, did you adapt quickly? Did you miss nature when you were in the city?
Yeah, and we always got sick.
Yeah.
We always immediately got a flu. We never got sick in the wilderness because it's a healthy place, even though it's very cold, especially in winter. But then we went back to town and we get in contact with all those bacteria and virus and whatnot. And then we got sick. And then we were always staying with friends because we never owned a house or anything in New Zealand. Yeah. And then they go to work. They come back at like 7 o'clock at night. Yeah. And then they want to socialize. But by that time, we want to go to bed. But we can't. And they switch on the light. And so my brain thinks it's daylight again. So I'm completely awake. And then they start eating dinner at 8 o'clock. And so my whole circadian rhythm is upside down. And I got completely sleep deprived within a few days. I'm absolutely exhausted after a week. So we couldn't wait to get back to the mountains. Yeah, we miss nature very much. Yeah. But we only stayed for a week.
I get it. So at one point, you decide to go on a 3,000 kilometers trail. I have no idea how to pronounce it. The Te Araroa Trail?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hiking. And I mean, I can't even imagine how tough it must have been. And there was a moment when you thought to yourself, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And you didn't want to say it out loud. And then Peter said, I'm so tired. And he mentioned that if you weren't within 100 kilometers of the finish, so to speak, you would have given up. Were there ever moments when you thought, what am I doing? What am I thinking? Were there any moments?
Yes. Also in our first year, it was springtime, and you think with springtime the weather should be better. But it was a very, very wet spring. It was September in New Zealand, and we had 3 weeks of rain, 3.5 weeks. Yeah. Of course, we didn't know the weather forecast, so we thought, maybe tomorrow is going to be better. But it was only getting worse and worse, and we were stuck in a 100-year-old hut. It was so dark that we couldn't even read a book. And if we go outside, we were attacked by a million sandflies. So it was really dreadful. But every day we thought maybe tomorrow is better and we can move on to a higher place where there is no sandflies. And maybe the weather is better. But the rivers were up. We could not even cross the rivers. So we're completely imprisoned. And I must say, if we had a choice to go back to our home, not that we had one, we would have done it. Yeah. But sometimes it's good not to have a choice, because otherwise you can go back and then you don't continue with what you intended to do. I'm glad we didn't have a choice. But there were moments that we thought, bugger this.
What am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked at the beginning of our conversation about the impact of living in nature on your body and mind. So what changes did it bring? And what about Peter, given the age difference? How did he experience it?
So I grew up vegetarian, never ate meat, and I did notice by eating wild meat that I became a lot stronger. And especially my hair became a lot thicker. I used to have very thin hair. And my fingernails became stronger. So I guess it's just the protein of the good meat. I would say I'm not sure if I would eat like supermarket meat. I think the wild meat is important for health. And not only the meat, but also the ligaments. We cooked up the whole animal. We didn't want to waste anything. So we also ate the soft ligaments and the bone marrow, the brain, the eyes, all the organs, all of these things, which sound very gruesome. And if you told me like 20 years ago you would do this, I would say no, never. It sounds disgusting.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did do it. You know, in a different setting, everything is different.
Yeah.
If you go to the wilderness in New Zealand, other side of the world, you know, and in the high mountains, and I catch a goat for you and say, now you have to eat a bit of liver, you probably do it because you're a different person there.
Yeah.
In a different setting, you're a different person. And you think, oh yeah, at home I would never do it. But, you know, here's different. So, I became overall a lot stronger physically by eating all that meat and, you know, a lot of exercise, walking with a heavy pack, that 3,000 kilometers on the Te-Araroa Trail, indeed. That was an incredibly tough thing to do. Unbelievable so.
Yeah.
But we also became so proud that we did it and completed it.
Yes.
And for Peter also, because Peter started doing this when he was like 61 or so. I don't think so many old people are doing the Te-Araroa. And for him, he had to come to terms with that, he's a lot older than I am, and I carry his weight. Like my pack is a lot bigger than his. So he had to be quite sort of humble, like, this is my wife, and yes, she's carrying 10 kilos more than I. Yeah. So it's more a mental thing, you know, that he's the man but not stronger. And, but actually we are turning all these roles around. Like he's the cook and I'm the hunter. And that's very weird in New Zealand. Like unheard of, you know. But because of our age difference, we are already very strange. So people are not so surprised after that.
Yeah, I get it. So how is Peter? Because I understand you returned to Europe because he's been having some health issues, some problems with his health. How is he now?
Yes, indeed. In 2018, we went to Australia. And Peter's always very slack with water, you know. He washes himself anywhere, which is a great idea in New Zealand where the water is so clean, but very bad idea in Australia. And consequently, he got a stomach bug. And we were in the desert near Mount Isa in the north. And he got a stomach bug, diarrhea, vomiting. And he got very dehydrated. And this often happens with travelers in Australia.
Yeah.
And he got so dehydrated that he lost consciousness all the time. So it's a worrying situation. So luckily we were close to the hospital. So we went in there. They took him straight away to the emergency department and they put him on a drip. And then they saw he had kidney failure because of dehydration. And he was 5 weeks in the hospital, which is an incredibly long time. And in the end, they said, you will recover because this is acute kidney failure and, you know, it takes you a month or so to recover. Bye-bye, you can go home. And we're like, oh, yeah, where's that? Anyway, we went back to New Zealand and we stayed with a friend. But unfortunately, he did not recover. And the doctor said to him, you have now chronic kidney failure, which means you will die of kidney failure, stage 4 or stage 5. And he said, you now need dialysis, which is a way to clean your blood, right? And that means you have to go every second day to the hospital and sit on a machine for 8 hours at a time. It's horrible to clean your blood.
Yeah.
And go on a waiting list for a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
And that sounds brilliant. I even thought, okay, I'll give my kidney. It's sort of cool, you know, that he has my kidney. But it's very complicated. There are many side effects from kidney transplant. For instance, you have to take immune suppressants because otherwise your body will get rid of this strange kidney, which means you get sick with all kinds of things such as COVID because you don't have any natural immunity for it. And another thing is skin cancer. And now Peter comes from a region in New Zealand where there was a lot of sun, which is near Nelson. And so his skin is very, very bad. And he is very prone to skin cancer. So he said, I have to choose between kidney failure and skin cancer.
Yeah.
So he said, maybe I choose kidney failure. Sounds better than skin cancer. So he chose not to go on dialysis. And that meant that we thought, okay, we only have 6 months left because he's going to die of kidney failure because that's what a doctor said, right? Stage 5 kidney failure. and he was not going to do anything. So what we did is we rented a house for the first time in 10 years to have, a nice time before he was going to die. But Peter had a lot of near-death experiences, even in the hospital itself. And so he is not afraid of death.
Yeah.
And I think because he has no fear, he's not wasting his precious energy on fear, because having a fear costs a lot of energy. And so we're just quietly waiting for him to sort of die. But he didn't die. He got better.
Yeah.
Against all the odds.
Yeah.
So the chance of that happening is like 5%. With no medicine, and Peter always say no alternative medicine either, because he believes that the body can heal itself. He looks at the trees and say, look, there is an innate program in the tree to choose life, to recover if possible, And so that's what he did. He recovered. His kidneys are not 100%, but it's now 5 years ago. So he's doing really well.
Yeah. Amazing. Good for him and for you. Yeah, that's good to hear. So you now live in Bulgaria? So where in Bulgaria do you live?
5 years ago, we walked through Europe from France in a direction to Istanbul. I wrote a book about that. My second book called Wild at Heart. And we saw this beautiful little cottage, 2 kilometers from a village in the Rhodope Mountains on the border with Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the opportunity to buy it for very, very little money. And so we did. We only lived a couple of months at that time. Then we went away. Then we went to Australia, where this whole disaster with the kidneys happened. Yeah. And then we got stuck in New Zealand because of COVID. So only 2 years ago, we were able to get back. So that's why we live now since 2 years in this little cottage. It's very primitive, off grid, no toilet, no bathroom, no kitchen, none of that. But it's very luxurious for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what made you decide to return to Europe?
Well, because we had a choice for once. We had a choice to go to this cottage. And also, New Zealand has become very expensive. Okay. So if you cannot live in the wild, God help you in New Zealand. There's a housing shortage and the prices are just through the roof. Okay. So we could literally not afford renting something, let alone buying something in New Zealand. But Bulgaria and Romania also, the houses are still very cheap. Yeah. So, I recommend going to the east.
Yeah, okay. So what I really find beautiful about your book, about your story, is your honesty. You talk about the intimate and personal conversations you have with Peter. And as we already talked about before, it's quite something to undertake such a journey with someone you only recently met. So what has this done to your relationship? Did it bring you closer, you and Peter, living in nature, living in the wilderness?
Yeah, indeed. Well, we met in India 18 years ago, and I moved in the very next day. So we've been together since the day we met. And we did a lot of things. We traveled through Southeast Asia. We ended up in Papua New Guinea, where Peter got malaria and nearly died there. And we got a lot of experiences. But living so isolated and just the two of us in the wilderness, of course, is a different level. And we are very good at living together. We must be. We spend more time together than most couples in their entire life. Yeah. So it's quite an art to do your own thing and to be together as well, to find that balance. Yeah, to not give up your own, your own life, which is what most people do, I guess. Yeah, it's mad, but I really enjoy living with him. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that there are listeners out there thinking, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to live in nature too. I want to go to the wilderness. I'm just going to do it, just like Miriam did. What would you like to say to those people?
Well, see if you like it first. Like I said in my short, I made a couple of YouTube shorts and you will recognize some of the text. But see if you like it first. So go out for a weekend. Go camping in a weekend. And then extend that a little longer because you might not like it. Because it's very hard. And we only persevered because we had no choice. If we had a home to go back to, they would not have done it. So I think it's important to burn all your bridges behind you. After you find out that you really like doing it. But also people say that's brilliant in the wilderness. You don't have to plan anything, no deadlines, nothing to stress about, which is true in some sense. But you have to be really organized. Yeah. You have to be almost like army style, you know. You have to have everything organized, otherwise you will die. Yeah. For example, the weather, especially in New Zealand, if that comes in and you get wet, you might well freeze to death because it can change from summer into winter in one day. Yeah. So hypothermia is always the biggest risk for hikers. Yeah. And river crossings. You know, all of these skills we learned in the years before we set out in the wilderness. But also simple things like how much firewood have you got before the rain comes in? Yeah. Because we cooked everything on a fire. So no wood is no cooking. Well, what a stupid mistake. Yeah. So you have to be very well prepared and a lot of skills also. For example, as I said, river crossing, fire lighting, just hiking in general, and then bush bashing. Bush bashing is just walking through the bush without a track. Sometimes we had to do that. And orientation. Yeah. You have to know where you are, right? Yeah. And then the hunting, but of course that's what I learned over the years. It took me about a couple of years before I became a good hunter. Yeah. And my fear was that I would get lost. That was my biggest fear. That I would go hunting on my own, then run after a goat, and the goat disappears and I run after it and then I am lost. Yeah. That was my biggest fear. But actually it didn't happen. Because in New Zealand are big mountains and big valleys. And you always know where the river is. Yeah. So that's easy. But here in Bulgaria, I get more often lost because the landscape is just so weird. It's all little hills and nothing to go by, no guideline, no handrail, as they call it, like a river or mountain range. Yeah, it's much harder. Yeah. Yeah. So all these skills.
Well, so you wrote a second book, Wild at Heart. Mm-hmm. And we agreed to record another episode together. But you are going to a Himalayan expedition.
So I'm going together with Sophie Hilaire, who has summited Everest in 2019. For 2 months, we will be walking over 3 mountain passes over 5,000 meters in the Indian Himalayas. Yeah, we organized this ourselves.
You did? Oh, okay. So you're just going, the two of you. It's not like... Yep. You're going with another group of people?
No. Originally, we want to go with the authors of a book that I have edited called Wilder Journeys that came out last March. Yeah, I heard about it. And all of these authors are extreme expedition members. You know, everyone has done something extreme. And we sat together and we said, okay, let's organize a Wilder Journeys expedition. So several were interested. I'm still hoping Angela Maxwell will come too. She's an amazing lady from America who walked across the whole world for 6.5 years. And at the moment, she and Carl Bushby are walking through the Keyzer-van desert in Kazakhstan. And they're soon going to swim the Caspian Sea. And I'm hoping she will be in time for our Wilder Journeys expedition. Yeah. But she might be a little bit tired.
Maybe just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Miriam, for your honesty and your openness. It's been truly remarkable to have this conversation with you. I'll start reading your second book. So after you return, we can talk about your second book and, of course, the expedition upon your return.
Yes, I will have many stories to tell after the Himalayas, I hope.
Well, good luck. Enjoy yourself. And
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for sharing your story with us. It's been a pleasure and a delight to have you on my show. As agreed, we will do another episode together real soon. In the next episode, I'm having an old friend on the show, Chantal Schiekels, and we will be discussing her new book. Thank you all for listening. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.